Alrighty, how is everyone doing today? Welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel, and this is a feature called Your Blind Side. And we look into um, things that I've encountered in my research that I think are relevant for the the Truth and Movement, things that um, might hit them in their blind sides, in their blind spots, things that I think have been neglected by the Truther movement with all their, um, all the great things that they've done in terms of uncovering uh, conspiracy psyops and, uh, info ops, but maybe have missed a few things, especially as we get further back in history and we get into the more obscure and just the things that maybe hit home the most, the things that uh, uh, go back into things that are closer to our heart, things that as you evolve spiritually, and you do spiritual work, you go deeper and deeper into your conditionings and your upbringing, and you have to scrutinize these things, and it takes a lot of time. It's not something that can happen overnight, and you have to start really at the surface, and then you go further deeper, deeper and deeper down. So this is just part of the process, and many of the people in the truther movement have not been at this very long. And so naturally, they're not going to have, you know, taken their digs that deep yet, especially given how much you uncover but by just scratching the surface. When you scratch the surface, there's a whole lot there. And so, and it's relevant and it needs to be dealt with. And so I think most of the truther movement is spending their time dealing with that, but there's a lot more to go. And you know, um, it all has to be done before we kind of move forward into this golden age. We're not going to just waltz into the golden age without you know going through a lot more, uncovering a lot more, and it's some of it's going to be painful, and in particular, it's going to strike at the heart of your personality, your culture, your you know your family life, your friends, and your relationships, your um, everything that you hold dear. And in particular, I believe this is very true with the Bible. Um, and I think a lot of Christians in the movement have kind of rejected uh, organized religion by now, but they still hold on to the Bible usually. And there's different interpretations in terms of the Old and New Testament. We, in my Bible Decode series, I've been focusing on the New Testament, but I do have a lot to say about the Old Testament that I haven't really gotten around to yet. But we were talking about it yesterday and looking at some of the work of Mauro Bolino, if that's how you pronounce his name, um, and just he's got a book here called Gods of the Bible, and uh, his take on it is that uh, very, I think, very convincing. Just that this is a story that is a concrete history, um, and that all of the God, spirit, glory, all of these religious words are mistranslations of common concrete words, uh, like flying machine, and the Elohim that we are. He leaves the word Elohim untranslated, whereas the your normal Bible's translated as God. Um, well, certainly it's in the plural, and Yahweh is identified as being among the Elohim. So Yahweh Elohim is, in my book, is just a dude, a very powerful, intelligent, and technologically advanced dude, but not a god, just a dude. One of many of these Elohim, including all of his rival Elohims that we consider to be like more like Satan, like Shamash, Baal, Ashtoreth, uh, even like Semiramis, all of these, uh, Baphomet. I don't even know if those last two come into the Old Testament per se, but just as examples, these are rival so-called deities, but really rival Elohim that, um, Yahweh Elohim basically demonizes. But there's a very interesting question. So the Elohim basically created the humans. The humans were already created by God, okay, as everybody else was created by God as well. That's in Genesis 1, um, which is the only part of the Bible that has any religion in it. And it's not even all of Genesis 1. I was wrong about that. I thought that the second creation happened in Genesis 2, but it's really at the end of Genesis 1. But then after that, the Elohim come in and they kind of hijack the story. Now, this is, first of all, this Hebrew story, this uh, Old Testament story is just a bad plagiarism of earlier stories. The same story, Garden of Eden, Cain and Abel, Noah and the flood, and all of that is in dozens of other stories that are much older than the Bible. So this is not an original story. This is originally Sumerian, and so it's instructive to look at that. But then you also have to um, look at uh, how the whole narrative shakes out, because at a certain point, these Elohim, uh, wherever they came from, they go back there. Um, at first, all of them, just about all of them, go back, except for a few, such as Marduk, who is also known as Ra. Um, but then I think this planet is invaded by a different group of extraterrestrials, or wherever they're coming from. Maybe beyond the ice wall, or maybe underground, or who knows. But they are um, way more bloodthirsty and psychopathic than even the Elohim. Yahweh Elohim seems to be like the most psychopathic of the Elohim, most warlike of the Elohim. And but the ones that come later and basically defeat Marduk and kick him off, they are the maybe like the Orions, and they are absolutely not messing around with being nice. And I think they're the ones that are causing all the problems now. So the Elohim, I don't think, are even in the picture anymore. But these are questions that Bellino asks at the end, and because he looks at both Josephus and Tacitus, who are Roman royals, and I completely discount anything that they say because they're the ones who wrote the New Testament, and they're engaged in a psychological operation to write the New Testament. And so when they tell their stories about how there was a war in the sky and then they left, that's both of them tell the same story. Um, Josephus says, uh, what I'm about to recount might appear to be a fable if it did not have the support of eyewitnesses before the sun went down. War chariots, and armies of soldiers could be seen in the sky over the entire region, emerging from the clouds and surrounding the cities. And then they first heard shaking and banging, and then a group of voices saying, "From this place we are leaving." And Tacitus says kind of the same thing. Armies clashed in the sky, swords blazed, and the temple shone with sudden flashes. And then doors of sanctuary opened, and a superhuman voice cried out that the gods were fleeing. And there was a great uproar as if men were fleeing. So this is what Bellino's using as evidence that these Elohim left. Um, that's not good evidence. I think it's absolutely worthless evidence because I know that the Romans were engaged in a psychological operation, and they wrote all of the New Testament and a chunk of the Old Testament as well, including the books of Job, a second half of Isaiah, um, Daniel, um, and then all the Apocrypha, all of the church fathers. That was all Roman. So there's not much left. But, the questions that Bellino asks here, did the Elohim leave at that time? Did only a few leave? Did they move to another territory? Will they return? Have they already returned? Have they always been here? We do not know and gladly leave the answer to those who claim to know. Um, will it be discovered that one day that the Elohim were extraterrestrials? Will it be discovered one day that the Elohim were extraterrestrials who had left the planet and then returned? Will it one day be discovered that the Elohim belonged to an antediluvian Earth race? Will it one day be discovered that the Elohim were representatives of a higher race that lived in the hollow earth? Will it be discovered one day that they were people who returned from the future? Will it be discovered one day that the Elohim were only fictional characters in a fantastic fable created by the fertile imagination of the biblical authors? And then he says, whatever the answer, it will not change our work. What is essential is that we no longer try to make people believe that Elohim means God. And, like I said, I don't believe that Elohim does mean God. I believe it means some uh, race of dudes who are flesh and blood, and they have to eat, and they have to go to the bathroom, and they have to, um, you know, wash themselves, and they die, and um, but they are way more powerful than we are, and they have way higher technology, and they're probably smarter too. But they have an array of personality disorders that weaken them, and uh, a ton of flaws to them, and they are not God. Now, that does not mean that this is an atheist interpretation. The God comes in before any of this happens. God created the Elohim. God created us, but we were altered through their genetic engineering. So, you know, we do have a strain of us of them in us. And, that's at least how I would chop up the book of Genesis. You know, Being a person that doesn't read Hebrew, doesn't read Greek, and but has common sense and is not, uh, going to it. I think the main problem is that everybody goes to the Bible as if it is a religious book, and they are already clouding it in that vein before they start looking at it. And so they're willing to, things that are in the Bible that they accept as being true, if they read them in any other book, they'd be like, oh, this is mythology, this didn't really happen. um, you know, but because it's the Bible, they give it this level of deference of, oh, well, this is a religious thing that happened. This is supernatural, but it's because of God. They're always putting God into the equation, and it's a mental illness. It's a minor mental illness, but nonetheless a mental illness. It's not like you don't know what gender you are, but it is still keeping you from going deeper into the truth of things. Um, okay, there were a million other things I wanted to talk about, but maybe I'll get into at least one of them tomorrow. So I guess I'll stop right here. You can like, share, subscribe, comment, contribute, and remember to watch your blind side.